Crashing down onto a brand new world is how Stranded Alien Dawn kicks off the game. It's a survival simulation game where a few marooned survivors must live up to their namesake and survive in this, what you could be forgiven for thinking, was quite a beautiful and peaceful world, but of course there are dangers lurking behind this flora and fauna. And ultimately, at its core, it is also a survival game and a city builder. And in this video, we're going to take a run through and check it out. It is sponsored, by the way, by Stranded Alien Dawn. Thank you so much for giving the opportunity to take a look. And as I mentioned, it is a brand new game, just come out of early access, available now on PC, PS4 and 5, Xbox One, X and S. And as you can see from the beginning, there are a variety of scenarios that it offers. The military outpost scenario is a brand new one. There's also the crash landing scenario, which you're witnessing in this video, as well as the trading post one. Once you've picked your starting scenario, you then choose a region, a moon, and there are lots of other interesting and fun things that I like that they added in here. Not only do the moons and the regions, of course, scale to difficulty, perhaps they mess with night and day or the harsh environment that you're living in, but also there was these extra features that I really liked as well inside of the game rules, and more ways to tweak the difficulty, the aggressiveness of animals, or the skills of your survivors. Lots of little things to tweak at the start of the game. They weren't overwhelming, but they gave me some flexibility in difficulty. Speaking of difficulty, let's actually crash into this world and see what it has to offer. When we crash land into Stranded Alien Dawn, we are left with essentially nothing. We have a crew up the top middle. These are our marooned survivors, and as you can see, each one of them is highly unique. Unique traits, unique favorites, favorite meals, favorite activities, and of course their skill set as well, some being better at combat, others better at cooking, for example. The world itself, of course, is fairly harsh, and so we're tasked with trying to survive, starting from, as you can see, fairly rudimentary and kind of basic shelters, right? From what we can scavenge from the spaceship around us, or perhaps we can chop down a few trees, mine some rocks, maybe. It's enough to get us started, but of course it simply won't do, particularly as the challenges of this world unfold. Our stranded survivors, as I mentioned earlier, have their own personalities and skills, and these will play through a lot in your gameplay, particularly as you start to move through, start to develop your shelters and your people. Here you can see at the start of the game, everything is fairly quick and dirty, right? Sleeping sacks on the ground, harsh shelters constructed out of our spaceship, but there's a lot more to it than that. Firstly, on the front of our people, you can see that you can set all sorts of things to really make sure that you're getting the most out of their skill sets. Choosing time for them to relax or work or sleep, for example, is one way to manage them more efficiently. But it's not the only way. There's also a schedule for their activities. So you can prohibit certain people from doing certain things. Perhaps the person with no cooking skill might want to stay away from the crock pot for a little while, for example. You don't have to do this though, you can keep it on simple, which I really liked because it meant that I could focus on different elements of the game at different times. Perhaps I'm focusing on this, construction, what to build, how to order it, what tools and bandages and equipment do we need. Or I could focus more on the building side, the base building side, and allow the game to auto-manage people. Speaking of base building, what is perhaps my favorite element of the game is as you move through, of course, you get access to better materials. You research them through research desks or discoveries, which we'll get to in a little bit. And then you can start to build something that looks a little bit more civilized here on this stranded alien world. Beds, fireplaces, wooden cabins, and dartboards. You name it, it's got it. Because of course, this base building element is not just serving to protect us, but also to serve the needs of our people. Their leisure needs or social needs, and of course their fundamental ones that they're going to need to survive perhaps the harsh winter, like shelter and warmth. It of course encompasses it all. And the other part of this story is the base building acting as a defensive structure. And that of course brings us into combat. Inside of combat, you can select your individual survivors and then draft them. You can choose to draft as few or as many as you like. And once they're drafted, as you can see, you have a lot more control over them. Selecting where they move, you can see how far they'll move, their range, And depending on what you've equipped them with, if you've got ranged weapons or perhaps just a crappy spear, will determine, of course, how they can fight. Here we've got the snipers out to take down some alien bad boys, but obviously that is not enough, because the combat in this game is not just about controlling our people, a little bit more than we would on a daily basis. It's also about defending ourselves. And much like the base building, I really enjoyed the upgrades to the defensive system. We started, relatively small, a crappy gate, a fence made of spaceship scrap metal most likely. And then as we move through, we start to upgrade our defenses, more sophisticated weaponry. And by sophisticated, I mean super sophisticated, right the way up to lasers. But I preferred the old flamethrower at the gate trick. Chuck a couple of traps in the gateway, put a flamethrower within range, and we will use it to great success. But of course, the walls themselves also act as pretty good defensive structures. Here I've decided to draft everybody because our base is under attack from some aggressive animals. While not every animal in the game is aggressive, there are many beautiful passive creatures running around. Sometimes you will get attacked, and that's when the base building and the combat, of course, come into one. However, they're not alone. Because part of getting new weapons and building up a base is, of course, research, which is the tech tree. But there's also this expeditions mechanic, where you can choose to send out a survivor inside of your hot air balloon once you've been able to get one. And you can send them out to explore all sorts of things, the natural world around you. In this case, a burning cruise vessel, a small cruise spaceship fell there, so I'm sending one of my survivors to explore. The kinds of rewards that they can pull in from these expeditions and these challenges vary a lot. It could be resources. It could be, like in this case, a technological breakthrough. We might even find life that's also crashed on this planet. Here's a crashed rescue pod, for example. There may be a survivor in store. Spoiler alert, in this case, there wasn't. But what I really like about these expeditions is that not only, of course, do they leverage the need for you to have a better base, to have better resources, to have a hot air balloon and fuel and skilled people who can go out and bravely carry out the research. But more than that, it's also one of the ways that the game helps to set itself apart from other similar games like this. And it's the fact that the journey itself is both deeply embroiled in the characters, their skills, what they like to do, and where they go on these expeditions. But also, the way that the game manages risk and reward and unpredictability is layered in very heavily here as well. There's story events to do with alien wildlife. There's all kinds of crazy weather events that can happen, of course, on an unknown world, like meteor showers. And all of this is happening while you're trying to place a sofa down in the new kitchen that you're building for your people. Right? So on the one hand, you've got this brave explorer and a hot air balloon looking for survivors. And on the other hand, you're like, actually, I think I'll put some tiles down in this new kitchen that I'm building. It'll go really nicely with the refrigerator where we're keeping all of our stews now, right? And that is, I think, one of my key takeaways from my time with Stranded Alien Dawn, was that it gave me the customization, the flexibility that I want. For example, in something like combat here, where I maybe rather foolishly decided to send but one survivor with some fairly tatty clothes on out to fight 4 of these incredible ranged scorpion-looking beasts. Perhaps not such a great idea, but I like the fact that combat is controlled manually like this. The resources that I've built up can be equipped to my character, and then it's up to me on where I position them and who I send with them on their fights. On the other hand, of course, if you're more interested in the passive city building experience, you can have that as well. By keeping people on their default tasks, the game does, in my experience, a pretty good job at managing who should go where. The orders system is sweeping. You could mark a whole forest to be cut down and they'd do it. Or you could keep some people around at home, building farms. And as I mentioned earlier, the MVP player of the day, the flamethrower traps. We didn't even need to get our sniper out because those bear traps at the door and those flamethrowers looking at the gate, they are absolutely brilliant. And also, finally, relate back to the point that I was just making. It's a hands-on game about combat and survival, but it's also a beautiful base builder and resource management. And crucially, of course, simulation game, simulating the fact that you are stranded here on this unknown alien world. The ultimate goal, of course, may very well be to take it over, or perhaps you want to protect it, decorate it, automate your defenses and your construction, and perhaps ultimately build a functioning space pad, a slight upgrade from the hot air balloon you might start with. I'm very selective with sponsors on the channel. Most of the time, I don't end up doing them, and I want to make sure that the games are always a good fit and high quality. And the reason why you're watching this video is because I believe the Stranded Alien Dawn is both of those things. Both as a survival and simulation game, but more broadly as something that was able to actually keep me hooked. And I think that it was able to do such a good job at that by firstly introducing me to the game very well. The little clips that you're looking at here are from the tutorials. There are around 6 of them. They take no more than 10 minutes each. They're really nicely focused on specific activities, and they set me up very well for the game. I'm not usually even a fan of playing tutorials in games, but these ones were pretty good. Moreover, though, here's the other things that you might want to know. Stranded Alien Dawn was in early access for a few months. I believe it went into early access on PC in October of 2022. It is now, of course, as I mentioned at the start of the video, released in full, not just on PC, but also our console brethren are lucky as well. PS4 and 5, Xbox One, X and S. So almost everybody is on board here. The game had a fairly short and, in my opinion, fairly successful early access. I love a game that is actually updated with meaningful things on time. I can think of a few other great examples of early access, and Stranded Alien Dawn was just one of those, and a very good one at that. It comes together in a really neat package, a package that I also think is pretty reasonably priced. You might say, well, of course you say that, Jumbo, it's a sponsored video, but no, quite genuinely. I think that Stranded Alien Dawn is a really good, detailed, enjoyable experience. It combines survival and simulation incredibly well. It keeps me hooked with the little things, like building a base and deciding where to put the solar panels or where to plant the farms, and big things, like trying to keep these people alive in what turns into, particularly as aliens get angrier and as conditions, environmental conditions get worse, a fairly difficult survival simulator too. Thank you so much for joining me in today's video of Stranded Alien Dawn. I'll see you next time.